You just press play on the Last Breath Huntcast, home of the Huntroversy. We're here to entertain, educate, and engage. And in case you didn't know, you only live once. But if you do it right, once is enough. Don't waste it.
Couple big things, though, to announce before we get into this. First off, we want to thank who makes this podcast possible. That's Badlands Gear. You can hear us talk about them a lot because, well, we believe in their products and their gear. They take care of us, and we wouldn't endorse them if we truly didn't believe in them. We can talk about their outer layers, their base layers, their packs, their bino harnesses, etc., but just hands down, simply put, one of the few companies that's in this industry that will stand behind their product unconditionally. If it's got that Badlands hook horns and that skull, you know that it is covered. We've had some amazing experiences. Another little star on their resume here is that I have a bino harness, and I wear the shit out of it. I actually broke one of the clasps, one of the buckles, during turkey season, and I was able to limp it along. I sent it in, and within 3 days, got a notification they received it, and it's already on its way back to me. So the guys and gals over there at Badlands, I mean, they take care of their customers. They believe in their gear, and so do we. So we just want to thank them for making this podcast possible. What do you want to say to the guests?
Yeah, if you're interested in buying anything on Badlands' site, we have 30% discount for anybody that supports us, supports our podcast or our brand. Again, 30% off site-wide. All you have to do is message one of the 8 of us. We have that. We will give it to you, and then you can have some for yourselves. And like you said, I'll just echo that. We've had nothing but really good experiences with the warranty department and everybody over there. So, great company.
Another cool thing that Badlands is doing is that they just launched this probably a couple months ago is their women's line, or they announced that it will be coming out. Something very exciting, especially for the gals on our team. Logan and Allie have been wearing Badlands gear, the men's smallest stuff that they could get, but now they're actually going to have female-fitted hunting garments. And boy, I tell you what, if you got,
it's going to be big for them.
It's going to be big for the huntresses across the United States. There's few companies out there that really manufacture hunting garments that are catered to a woman's build, and Badlands is going to deliver. I think if you've got a wife, a girlfriend, a daughter, anybody in your reach that is a huntress, so to speak, and they're ready to elevate their gear, I think that's something you'll want to look into. And this is kind of a floating target here for when they're going to launch it, but I believe Badlands is going to try to have this available for women at the end of summer, so right before the fall.
Yep.
With us.
Yeah.
So that being said, I think we've checked all the boxes that we need to cover right now. Our Huntroversy today is really specifically diving into unethical shots. And I've got 12 different shots that I've kind of broken down here. And we're going to highlight, obviously, the animal white-tailed deer. It's the most hunted. These can dabble into other species, but for the most part, in context, we're going to be talking about the whitetail deer. And with that, I've broken it down 12 shots with the bow and the gun, and we'll go from here. So these are our opinions. Me and you are going to share them back and forth and see what we think.
Okay.
I've got a little write-up about each one, what my 2 cents is. And again, mind you, just because I don't think that a certain shot or an angle or a scenario is not ethical doesn't mean that it can't kill a deer. There's always outliers and everything else, and I'm not here to tell you where or how you should or shouldn't shoot your deer. These are just opinions. And everybody's got one, just like an asshole. So thank you for listening. Let's dive into it. Shot number 1 is running shots.
Ooh, boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if the listeners have been diehards and probably followed us for very long, they know that I am not a fan of these in any way, shape, or form. Not necessarily saying a moving shot, because I do think that if there's an animal within a certain amount of range and they're moving slowly, controllably, on a steady walk, something along those lines, that I do think that you have the ability to make that shot very successfully and ethically. I'm talking about a running shot, and to give more context to this, a little bit more light, in the essence of how a deer would move if it's being drove. So for me, both with a gun and a bow, I'm chalking it up as a no. Mr. Putnam, what are your thoughts?
I think it's all about context. With a bow, I think a running shot, running is tricky because running is obviously implying moving, and I learned a lesson of hard knocks last deer season. When I was trying to stop K2, I tried to stop him 4 times, real vigorously between about, that 18 to 24 yard mark several times. And finally he was about to go out of my shooting window. And as he was walking continually, I just put the arrow where I thought it should go and pulled the trigger. And it did hit him back because he was moving. Luckily, I found him. We recovered him, which was awesome. And had he not been moving, it would have been a, easy chip shot. So moving and running are 2 really different things, and I think it's all depending upon the speed in which an animal is moving. I think for the most part, you're going to want a deer at a walk or a standstill with a bow. Obviously we prefer it to be standing still, but I think for a gun, it depends on the animal that we're talking about as well, because I know lots of coyote hunters that will make a running shot on a coyote.
Correct.
I do know some turkey hunters, when the air quote jig is up, I've made a shot where a turkey comes bopping into the decoys, sees something he doesn't like, and then he's putting away.
Mm-hmm.
I've put a shot on a turkey as he's clucking away there, but in the context of deer,
correct.
I'm not a big fan of running like drive style shooting when a deer is, busting ass out and it's been scared. Because typically, given the nature of the scenario that we're laying out here, when a deer is scared, it's not gonna run broadside parallel to you.
So, and
more often than not, it's going to run straight away.
Right.
Which that's not great.
So
anyway,
to add context, again, I don't want to blur the lines between a moving shot and a running shot, because I do agree with you that I do think, a deer walking into the decoy, the example of K2, is a much different scenario than a deer that has been jumped out of its bed and is running away for its life.
Yes.
So, and same thing with a coyote too. Giving context to that, it's considered a varmint, which, as far as ethically speaking, probably shouldn't matter. But I think for a lot of people, and me included, fucking let lead fly, right? But most people that shoot coyotes are using a center-fired rifle round that's 3,000 to 4,000 feet a second. Gets there quick. With a turkey, I do agree with you there that you can shoot a moving target for the fact that you're shooting a pattern instead of a single projectile.
Sure.
For the same concept
that's good.
Of saying, like, you shoot pheasants moving, right? You have to.
You have to.
So with there, I do think you have a forgiving pattern with the turkey. But in a nutshell, my synopsis is, I do not believe that a running deer is an ethical opportunity, for the reason being that it doesn't matter how skilled you are as a shot. If you are the best shot that you can be, absolutely, or best shot, period, with a bow or a gun, I feel like the problem is the outlier of the animal. So given the scenario that a deer is running, you have an erratic, unconventional movement. Just as you alluded to, a deer that's evading something is not going to run in a straight line. It's not going to be linear, and it's also going to be at different speeds and different heights. So if you've ever watched a deer run away, it's going to be both moving in a linear fashion, zigzagging, if you will, or take a cut or a turn. But more importantly than that is that you've watched deer run across the field, and they'll take a couple of their running strides, and then they'll take a big jump, or they'll take a couple of big jumps. Like you can't guess it. And when you have to lead an animal like that, like
you are guessing.
You right. Because if a deer were to move in a straight line from left to right at a given speed, that can be calculated out, and you can have the correct holdover to hit that shot every time.
Kind of like what Matt did with Phantom. I mean, Phantom he was very, he was on a very steady trot the way he was coming. He wasn't very far, 20, 25 yards.
Correct.
So given that, and given the consistency that he was moving with, that's a slightly different conversation.
Well, and like I said before, every scenario is different. I'm not telling you that this is an ultimatum. It's my beliefs, right? I feel like more times than not, you yield yourself an opportunity for error at a running deer than if you were at a stationary or a very slow moving animal.
Sure. I've got another thing to add before we go to number 2. I'm a big believer in practicing how you play. That's the reason why I go shoot my bow out to 60, 70, 80 yards. So that way those 40 and 50 yard shots, I can make them. It's not that I intend on making a 60, 70, 80 yard shot. I just want the 30s through 50s area to feel really, really easy. For that same reason, I don't know many hunters out there that are going to the shotgun range when they're sighting in their muzzleloader shotgun or their bow, and they are practicing shooting at a moving target. Number one, I don't know how you would facilitate that without a serious amount of machinery and a really well thought out system for, maybe like running a buck decoy down like a rail system that you built. Like, I don't know how you would physically do that other than like at a high caliber, like professional grade, like FBI SWAT team shooting range.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing for me, is because, that people can say and sit here all day long like, I felt comfortable taking the shot. That's fine. I'm not disagreeing with that. All I'm saying is that people are not practicing those shots.
It's kind of like a trick shot in my mind.
It's kind of like an impossible shot to practice.
To practice, absolutely, because like you said, how do you duplicate something that isn't going to do the same thing? Even my example of a trick shot's not right, because I can throw up a milk jug and I can have that milk jug be within 2 or 3 feet of where it's going to go every time, and I'm practicing that same shot every time.
You are,
but again, you let 10 deer out of a cage, and those 10 deer are not all going to take the same path of travel at the same speed.
One's going to bust left, run a little C and look back at you. The other one's going to bust hard right. The other one's going to lope away.
So I don't know. Again, I know there's a lot of people that enjoy driving deer. To each their own. I hope that you guys don't ever have bad experiences. To summarize it, I just feel like a running shot yields you an opportunity for a wounded animal. With that comes the weight of that, and I don't know if it's worth it. A running deer. So
sure.
Moving on, we've got something that is that's also, I think it's getting down a little bit on the Richter scale, but long shots. And again, this is very subjective to the skill of the marksman and the weapon that they're using. So for me, my answer with both gun and bow is varies. I don't think that it is a hard yes or a hard no, because long to you might be different with a bow to somebody else. Quite very different.
Well, I've got a big difference for me. Like a long shot to me on a coyote, like if it's like far out there, is like a 300 plus yard to 450 yard coyote shot. If it's over 450, I probably, with the setup that I have and the scope that I have and the magnification power that I have, the bolt that I'm shooting, I probably wouldn't shoot anyway. But to Shane Jones, who lives out in a place where you can make legitimate mile-long shots, like to him, 400, 500 yards, that's like, all right, here we go, coyotes in our laps, like chip shot. But that's totally a subjective thing, where his definition of far is vastly different than my definition of far. So
I think it also varies for the condition too, right? So a 50-yard shot with a bow out of a blind at a deer that's eating clover is very different than a 50-yard shot out of a deer stand with a 20-mile-an-hour crosswind. So again, that's where I couldn't put the button down on this one to either yay or nay. I think it's very situational. I think it also is dependent on how confident and comfortable you are, how proficient you are with the weapon of choice. So I do think that by becoming a student of your weapon, by mastering it to the best of your ability, allows you to take longer shots, allows you to have more opportunities because you can extend your range more effectively. And that's what I think. So like you alluded to, a guy like Shane Jones, 500 yards, he's going to range it. Yep. If he's got the time, he'll run a dry fire, set his mills or MOA, and he's going to slap that son of a bitch right in the breadbasket every time. The dude can just make it happen.
Yeah.
For guys like us that don't have the ability to practice that often, that don't put ourselves in those situations very often, that's a much more calculated shot. You know what I mean? So
lots more on the line.
Anything else you want to add? That's kind of a quick one, but I feel like it's something to bring in there. I do want to add the caveat that there are some yardages, some markers, some distances in my mind that are just, that's too far, especially when it comes to ethics, right? I think that shooting like 1,000 or 1,200 yards for steel
is much different than shooting an animal at that far.
Correct. I mean, that's cool, and I think that's really neat to practice it. One day I hope I have the ability to stretch out my 300 PRC that far to see what the gun can do. But with an animal, man, I feel like that's getting to the point where you're almost just like, do I really have to take that far of a shot? You know, it is a 1,000-yard opportunity the best that I can put myself in? Yeah. Same thing with archery in the context of there's a lot of companies out there that boast their crossbows 100 yards sub-MOA or 100 yards tight-ass group or 100 yards shoots better than your rifle. We've heard it all. And that's really cool. But again, is that getting to a point in distance where no matter how good your weapon is, there's so much flight travel. You have so many other variables between target and shooter that could affect it. Just as a rifle, 1,000 yards, you got a bullet flight travel of, 8, 10, 12 seconds, depending on what you're shooing. An animal can move a long ways in 10 seconds.
I'd really love to get Josh Bomar, Cameron Haynes, or Levi Morgan's take on this one, just because all three of them had killed, in that 80-plus yard mark with a bow.
I would love to know what their cutoff is. Like what their mental, that's too far. Because like you said, they have, and we've seen it, and it's like, dude, they put in the work. They're confident in their equipment, and I've watched Cameron Haynes shoot a Glendale buck at like 160 yards with his bow.
Not to shit on you and I, because we practice with our bow all the time, but
it's not what we do for a living.
No, an 80-yard shot I consider to be a bomb. That's my definition of a bomb. Yeah, even a 70-yard shot is a bomb. But to him, I think our equivalent of 30 yards is his like 80-yard shot.
Sure.
Legitimately. Like, you're stacking arrows. We can touch arrows at 30. We can touch arrows at 40, but he's touching arrows at like 80, 90, 100.
Sure.
And I wanted to add a little bit too about just your effective kill radius. Everybody knows that half the diameter of a circle is a radius. And essentially, if you have your deer stands, your blinds put up on your property, and you have a radius that's built, your maximum effective kill range, your yardage, whatever you're thinking it is, and you pivot a little circle around the point that you're at. Well, if your maximum range that you're comfortable killing something at is 20 yards, let's say, well, if you can practice up and shoot 50, then you have time and a half,
if you multiplied your ability
increased
to kill.
your ability and shoot. I mean, especially with whitetail hunting, most people are hunting, 20, 30, 40, 50, several hundred acres. The odds of getting a mature whitetail within that little sliver of the land you're hunting mathematically is like less than 1%. So if you can get that bigger aid by doubling or, time and a halving your effective kill radius, then I feel like you're in a good place where you're going to be slightly more effective.
Well, my other last little tidbit here is like when we get to that maximum effective range is simply just energy.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If you look at any ballistic chart for a rifle or a shotgun,
everything falls off eventually.
Correct. You're losing velocity the further you go. Same thing with an arrow. Now, even though an arrow does carry momentum better than a gun, but still at a certain point in time, like with bullets, they become subsonic. And at that point, they really start to lose their mustard. So then it gets to an issue of, okay, yeah, you can pop a balloon at this far, but is it enough to penetrate the body cavity of an XYZ animal enough to make it lit? So, anywho, that's why I said long shots, it varies. I'm not going to put it on one side or the other. Moving on, this is one that me and you really don't do very often, especially when it comes to any ungulate species, is headshots.
Oh, yeah.
So I went with no for a gun and a hard no for bow. What do you think?
Well, I feel like it depends on who you're talking to. I think that there is one particular Facebook group that I'm in that I'm just kind of a passive, kind of view it from the outsides type of viewership on that group. And it is perfectly okay within that group to a lot of people to take a headshot with a rifle or a shotgun on a deer. And now it's bloody and gruesome. It's not a pretty picture, but I will say and agree with them that huge emphasis on if, and no, I don't necessarily condone this, but I mean, it's pretty well arguable that it's an effective way to kill something by shooting it in the head.
You hit it.
If you hit it right in the head. There's not a lot of room for error, though, when you're making that kind of shot. For example, if you are holding, center body up, down, in that low lungs area, and, a couple inches behind the shoulder in that mid lungs area, if you pull it to the right, you could still hit the liver. If you pull it to the left, you could still hit the front lung, maybe top heart area, or get into some vitals in the shoulder, all those ventricles and veins running in the shoulder there. If you hit them high, you could hit them in the high upper lung, and if you hit them low, you could still get a chance to get some of those arteries running back out of the heart. So there's a lot more room for error on that one versus, even a big buck, their heads are fairly large, but the brain,
Bingo.
I've heard some horror stories of people shooting like the nose off a deer.
Bingo.
And they don't die, and it's bad. So
it's an agonizing death.
Hugely agonizing.
You literally almost verbatim had what I've written down. Now, there's no arguing that if you make a good headshot, a correct headshot,
it's going to go right down.
It's
no track
It's
job
probably
required,
the most
very
ethical. Correct. But the problem is like, we've cut antlers off a deer. We've done all the jazz. Like, to me, I feel like a brain, the size of a brain of a mature deer is about the size of a baseball.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a 3-inch circle. By most people's standards, the kill zone, which you're referencing, of a deer is about a 12-inch circle. Okay? So you've got a 4 times larger area to be able to hit to effectively and ethically kill the animal.
Yeah.
That's where I think it's not a question of does the gun have enough power to do it? Yeah, it does, without a doubt. But, just like you talked about the nose or the jaw or shooting them in, maybe in the high part of the neck, all those areas a deer won't die immediately from. It's not a deer that I almost guarantee you won't recover, but that deer is going to live out the rest several days of its life pretty miserably. So again, I guess in the context of headshots, I other than trying to say saving meat, I don't understand why you would take it. Why would you go for that option rather than the larger, more forgiving, and more traditional kill zone? It just, to me, I don't see a circumstance where it's like...
I have an edgy answer as to why.
Way. Go ahead.
I think most people that hit deer in the head, especially I've seen it a couple times online with an arrow, I think it's one of those things where the shot was not good to begin with. It was high and towards the deer's head, and then the deer spun and whirled, and you ear hold it and got lucky, or you caught the eye, got lucky, or you hit him right in the spine, got lucky, and then you pawn it off as I was aiming for that.
Well,
I was aiming for that. And that's the scenario in which I think that I can see it happening online with the bow, because in all intents and purposes, and I'll go ahead and say it, I don't care if my opinion's brash on this one, I think it's pretty stupid to shoot a deer in the head with a bow.
Yeah.
Pretty dumb.
Well,
it's a skeletal. I mean, the skull of a deer, if you factor in the fact that it takes a mechanical, like our DeWalt reciprocating saw, quite a while, a minute, to get through the skull cap to take the antlers off, like a broadhead that's massive, which lots of people shoot mechanical broadheads.
Even if it's fixed,
it's not going to penetrate, and I don't think a fixed one will either. And it's a skull is curved; it's a curved surface. So even if you do hit it there's room for that to deflect and it to not penetrate that skull cavity. So I think most of the times when you see an arrow and a headshot online or on a forum or something, it's a person that got lucky that's pawning it off as though they tried to make it happen, which I don't think it was. And for a gun, I do think it's an ethical shot if you can make the shot, but there is not very much room for error when you take that shot with a gun or bow.
I think that's very interesting what you're bringing up. So Tim Wells, we've talked about him on the podcast before for other different reasons, but one of his most infamous shots was shooting that grizzly bear with his bow, and the bear, you see it, and this was years ago, the bows were a lot slower, the bear had time to move, turned into the shot, hit him in the head and stoned him. Now he's flaunted the hell out of that shot, but he was not aiming for that deer's head.
No.
Or bear's head.
No.
Got extremely lucky, again, given the situation, he was on the ground with a full-size grizzly bear within bow range. But regardless, I think that is exactly the picture you were painting of, more times than not, that a headshot deer with archery equipment is often not the shot they were planning on taking, but
bad shot, bad reaction by the deer. Very, very, very lucky to have hit him in the head and penetrated the skull cavity and put him down by the hunter.
So anywho, again, if you're a headshot guy, good for you, man. Or
don't do it with the bow. I won't give him that good for you. I'll say you're kind of stupid if you take that one with the bow. So no offense, but if you do it with the gun, it's way different.
My next one is something that, again, I guess we don't practice very regularly. We have done it, but it's neck shots. So with this one, it's no for a bow, yes for a gun. And I was really on the wire of saying no for a gun. Pretty close to. But, we've had circumstances where we've shot deer in the neck with guns, and it's been extremely effective. And we've also been down to Texas where we shot hogs, and there's a lot of people down in Texas who shoot hogs that are firm believers in that neck shot. And so, again, I feel like a neck shot leaves you smaller room for error, bigger room for error than a headshot. But I do think that with a gun or with specifically like a high-powered rifle, something with a lot of energy, you do have the ability to just drop that animal in his tracks and recover him. But what do you think?
I agree with the fact that it's going to drop. Again, I think it's just a really, really small margin of error, and I think the majority of times when people are aiming, I think that 99% of hunters are aiming at the vitals on an ungulate species. So when we're talking deer, elk, antelope, I guess an antelope wouldn't technically be in there, but a caribou and all things of that nature, mule deer, I think most people are aiming for the vital area, meaning the heart, the lungs, everything in front of the liver, everything including and behind the shoulder, including. The reason I say that is if you're a firearm hunter, we pin the shoulders together when we're firearm hunting.
Sure.
So I think if you make the shot, I think it's, again, highly ethical. But I think here, in terms of the difference that I have between a headshot and a neck shot, is here I feel like you're relying on a neck shot to potentially immediately paralyze the animal. Correct. Where I feel like if you're shooting a deer in the brain and you hit it in the brain, it's going to die. It's like you said, arguably one of the most ethical ways to take a deer off the face of the earth. They're not going to feel a single thing. It's just lights out. That's it. But if you're shooting it in the neck, I feel like at that point it's probably paralyzed, and you're still going to have to finish it.
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially. And I think a lot of people, when they hit a deer in the neck, it's, again, one of those scenarios where they're aiming, the deer gets low and whirls, they get lucky, and they paralyze it.
Or,
I've
seen neck shots a lot in those running shots that we talk about where maybe the deer was led a little bit too far. But anyway, in context, I do think that it's somewhat acceptable, and I'm surprised I'm saying that with a gun, but absolutely not with the bow. You just don't have that type of shock value, that energy, specifically kinetic energy, with a bow on a neck.
I have an interesting. It kind of depends for me on what part of the neck we're talking about, because I will defend Matt here on this and Corey Jacobson, and to call what I'm about to call the neck area is more so the upper brisket, lower neck, meaning if a deer is frontal to you, they call it the thoracic opening. This Elk 101 course that I got you for your birthday before you went elk hunting. Corey Jacobson basically has this idea, this theory that where an ungulate's neck attaches to its body cavity right there by the brisket, there's a huge hole, a huge hole in the skeleton right there frontal, and not necessarily with whitetails all the time, but with elk, many times elk are being called in frontal. I mean, if you're calling an elk to your position, they're going to probably more than likely walk right at you, and he pulls off that shot frequently. He shoots high poundage. He shoots a really gnarly little fixed blade broadhead with a lot of kinetic energy in his arrow. And he threads.
I'll back you up because you're dabbling into another area.
Okay.
Because to me, a neck shot is a broadside neck shot.
Okay.
And to me, that's not, like if you think about our neck roast, I'm talking about the neck. I think it's just muscular structure.
I think it's make or break. I think if you hit the spine, then the deer's going down, and if you don't, then I don't think it's a lethal shot. I don't, unless you get very, very lucky, clip an artery in there. Mm-hmm. But as we know from the Mirage buck, the buck you killed 5-6 years ago, that deer had a sabot in its neck, and it had lived through the following year. Had him on trail camera the year before. Kind of altered his rack a little bit. One side got a little weaker, and we were able to find that and pick that out of him.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously that wasn't a lethal neck shot, but
so the next one is should be an immediate answer, I think, for most hunters, but it's gut or pounce shots, and that's a double no. And the reason being is this, and I'm not afraid to say this, the pig man on an episode once, I actually even made a post about it, was trying to promote center shooting deer with large expandable broadheads. And I don't know if he was trying to cover up the fact that he just 100% gut shot the shit out of a buck in Texas or what, but he did. He center punched it. I mean, if you take crosshairs on a deer and go center and center, it's right in the middle of the gut. And he shot the deer and he recovered it. And now I'm not saying that a gut shot is not a lethal shot on a deer, especially with large mechanicals. But again, we're talking ethical shots here. I do not think it is in any way, shape, or form. It should not be promoted, should not be practiced. And this is not an extreme quartering away shot. We'll get into that because unfortunately sometimes those shots do yield an opportunity to enter the pouch or the gut. But, we're talking a broadside, center of the center, middle of the middle shot. I don't see any reason why that shot would be taken other than for the simple factor of it's the most, if your objective is to hit the animal, it's the biggest room for error because you got the most amount of error to the right, to the left, to the up, and to the down, right? But for no other reasons, other for sake of hitting the target, hitting the animal, which that's not your objective anyway. It should be to cleanly kill it. It should not be a shot that even crosses, I believe, a true outdoorsman's mind.
Yeah, I don't think it crosses most people's mind, but I just think the reality of hunting is sometimes things change, sometimes you move, sometimes you don't make the most ideal shot. As we all know, inches can make or break you, especially in bow hunting whitetails. And I think most people that hit deer in the guts, it's on accident, and more times than not, if they do a good job on diligently tracking it, and what I mean is
giving it time, backing out,
going through the ropes, going through the paces of backing out, analyzing that it was not a good shot, making sure that there's no pressure that's being put on that deer that would give it any reason to leave before it expires. You're going to find the deer sometimes.
Oh, and trust me, man, if you haven't made a bad shot on an animal, then you probably haven't been hunting long enough, right? It happens to everybody. I'm not talking about accidents, not at all.
Right. No, I don't think. Yeah,
I've made bad shots. It feels terrible. It's not what you're talking about. No,
it's a double no for me with a gun and a bow. I don't know why anybody would be aiming there.
So getting into your thoracic opening, now we talk about straight on shots.
Frontals. Correct frontal.
Yep. So for me, I have varies and varies again. Very situational. Not to rag on Matt, but I will say I don't think in a deer stand that this should be a shot you take, period, the end, given the fact of the arrow angle. Yeah. So unless you're going to Byron Horton one stick it on a tree and you're hanging out about 3 feet up, I just, that's you've got a small window there to make it happen. But I do think, as you alluded to, as I practiced and studied, if you're on the ground, especially calling, those animals are going to be coming to the noise, which yields you, as you said, the thoracic opening. And I think that your margin of error decreases significantly with a firearm due to the fact that they're a little bit easier to handle, a lot more easier to for most people, asterisk here, to be more precise with it, and the fact that they have more energy to go through more media. I think it's a little more forgiving. But with bows, again, situationally, specifically on the ground and in closer range, I do think you have a really good opportunity to ethically take an animal.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think I've seen a ton of videos online, and we're talking about a gun here first. I've seen a ton of videos where you chest an animal. That's what I kind of commonly refer to that term as, chest him. I've seen that happen, and the animal's back legs go out from underneath it, and it just folds, and it drops right there.
Right.
And it's because, not only are you transferring all that energy, you're transferring it to the point where it's the longest amount of stuff it could go through on an animal, meaning with Josh, perfect example, with your buck you killed 3 years ago called Josh, you hit him in the upper lungs, And he didn't even really know what happened because it was only through, about 14, 15 inches of him. And it was really clean. And I think it probably went through perfectly between both ribs,
Yeah.
stuck into the ground. One of those textbook archery shots where you got to pull your broadhead and your lighted knock out of the dirt. And perfect, awesome. But that was only, a foot and a half versus the 3.5-ish feet of a whitetail, or in an elk or moose case, much, much longer than that. You're transferring all that kinetic energy to all of those vital areas. And I feel like you can fold an animal pretty easily and ethically with a gun if they're frontal. But I think it kind of depends on the situation with archery. But what I will jump in here and defend Matt is, I think if the shot is inside 20 yards, I think if it's inside 20 yards and the deer or elk or whatever you're shooting at doesn't have an opportunity to duck an arrow or spin or whirl or whatever, I think that most marksmen should be able to hit the thoracic opening with their equipment. On a whitetail, it's going to be about a 7-8 inch circle. On an elk, it's going to be bigger than that. And to me, if you're a pretty good shot with your bow, respectable enough to be taking it out into the woods ethically and killing an animal with it, I think that ethically you can kill that deer really cleanly if you make the shot, which I would expect you to be able to hit a 7-8 inch circle with your bow at, between 6 feet and 20 yards. I would expect you to make that shot. But I will say that
my problem is just the angle,
yeah.
And then,
I totally understand with the angle. I disagree with it in that regard, but
that, and then you just don't know what the animal is going to do. Because to make that 6-7 inch circle shot, you're probably going to want to stop them.
Yeah.
And when you stop them, you alert them. Anywho, Matt's done it, and we've said it before, one of the most instinctive hunters that we know, right? I feel like if Matt was put off on that situation this year, he probably wouldn't have done it. But he was confident. Confidence kills a lot of shit for him, and it worked out really well. I think as a general rule of thumb, and for me, if I'm in a deer stand and I'm elevated and
to defend him a little bit more too, that stand is real low. It's not a high tree stand. It's like a double buddy ladder stand.
Yeah.
Is what he was in. We're talking 12 feet off the. It wasn't very high.
Which I do think helps a ton.
Yeah.
For that situation, for the angle of entry for that arrow.
Yeah, it's not a. But anyway, let's keep trucking.
Yeah. So changing up slightly is quartering 2 shots, and when I say quartering 2, in my mind, I'm envisioning like a whitetail at a 45 degree or harder quartering 2 to you, because at a certain point in time, where do you say this is a quartering 2 or a quartering away shot because there's a slight angle, it's not perfectly 90 degrees. I'm referencing a hard quartering 2U shot, where you're staring at the point of the shoulder or harder, right? That's what I'm referring here. For me with a bow, I say no. And for a gun, I say yes. And again, the reason for this is simply put, the kinetic energy, the penetration power of firearms. I've seen people take quartering 2 shots with deer, and right? You always almost often see the successful ones. People really aren't going to highlight the fact that they took or if they made a shot and didn't recover the deer, you're not going to highlight it, let alone if it was an edgy shot. But with the forgivingness of centerfire rifle rounds or shotguns or muzzleloaders, you can crumple them sons of bitches. Put it on the point of the shoulder, let it eat. With the bow, there's just a lot of bone structure right there that I feel like just might not end well for you. So I got to, like I said, no for a bow, yes for a gun.
And I've seen deer get shot under the point of the shoulder, a quartering 2 deer, and it kind of depends on the definition of quartering and how swung open or closed the vitals are to you. But I would agree with a bow. I think that if you're going to try it, it had better be pretty low, and it had better be with a fixed broadhead. Right. Because I think there's going to be a lot of heartbreak if you lob a mechanical down the side of a deer if it whirls the wrong way. It's just there's a lot of room for error with that shot. So
yes.
I'd probably go with a double no. I have seen it, like you said, on the internet though, work out where a guy will hit a deer and they'll just drill right through the shoulder. They'll get lucky. They won't hit any bone and they'll go right into the heart.
Yeah.
And that deer will die in seconds.
Yep.
And that's great for them, good for them, lucky for them. But I don't think it's a shot that works out the majority of the time. I would say it's you're playing less than with 50-50 odds, I think, if you try to make that shot.
Right. And I think the most quartered deer I've ever shot with a bow, and he wasn't really that quartered, but I had to hit him higher in the shoulder, more forward in the shoulder, was Slick. And I remember it like it was yesterday. It was one of my favorite hunts that me and you've ever been on. It was a rainy, dreary day, and when I drew back, he'd stopped on his own, and I had these 2 vines that were about an inch thick hanging right where I wanted to put my pin. And I had a decision. Do I go further back in the kill zone, or do I try to hug the shoulder? And in that scenario, I chose to stick to closer to the shoulder. He was at 14 yards, and he was, for most intensive purposes, pretty broadside there. But yeah, I decided to take the shoulder out. It worked. It ended in a happy story for me. But I agree with you 100%. And another thing to allude to is that I feel like a lot of times you'll have those deer when they're quartering you, you try to hug that crease, and they will tense up and move their shoulders back, and they'll literally physically stop the penetration of that arrow. I feel like we've seen that happen before, where literally you if that deer wouldn't have moved, and that arrow would have been able to slide right through there, it would have been fine. But when he tenses up all that muscle and the scapula slaps that shaft, I feel like it has the ability to cut off the energy and legitimately stop the arrow from passing through.
Yeah, the same thing can be done when, if you're just sitting around casually in a recliner or something, take one of your hands and hit yourself in the shoulder, like right on your shoulder bone, and don't tense up your opposite arm that you're hitting, and then tense it up and now hit it.
Right.
I mean, there's a big difference between going through non-tense and tense muscle, I feel like, when you're hanging around with that shoulder area with a whitetail. So
next one,
that was a good one.
Number 8, the Texas Heart Shot. Straight up the old poop shoot.
Jesus.
As our buddy Catching Deers would say, the old pecker pop. So I say double no. Again, I feel like that this is one that should not be taken. It is often a Hail Mary, if you will.
Desperation,
maybe a missed opportunity, or the deer spooked before you were ready. And all you're seeing is that flag, and we've had it before, is running straight away. And you're going, man, I don't know. Again, like many of these scenarios, I bet almost everyone we could say, we've seen it before. And we have. I have. I know a gentleman this year that shot a very nice deer in this fashion. And I think there's a lot of reasons why this probably shouldn't be something that's promoted or practiced. Margin of error, extremely high. Ethically, extremely low. And again, I don't know if that's something that I definitely wouldn't. I wouldn't feel proud telling someone I shot a deer like that.
No, I wouldn't either. And I think one of the silver linings and one of the reasons that's huge to why I hunt, other than I just really feel at peace being outdoors, I love hanging out with you, but one of the big reasons for me is I love having all that venison, and I know that when that deer is running away from me, and because I would never try that with the bow, but if I had a shotgun, could you kill a deer like that? Yeah, you can fold it for the same reason why a frontal shot is systematically shocking for a deer to absorb. You're going through all of that media.
Except the opposite direction.
Except you're going the opposite direction, and most if not all of that meat
is tainted.
Probably going to be ruined. And at that point, if you're saying, okay, I'm okay with all of this animal being wasted, I think that's super unethical.
So for me, I do think that the kill zone, I will argue the point that the quote-unquote kill zone on a deer running away versus coming in is bigger. I think now you've got like an 8-inch oval almost, right? Because if a deer is running away and you hit high, you can hit him in the neck and spine him. You could hit him in the back of the head.
Well, you can hit him where you can hit him in the rear spine where the hams connect.
And then you drop their back half. I get that, but I guess in my mind, if a deer is running away, to me, I missed my opportunity. I did something wrong.
Yeah,
either I missed my first shot, or I spooked them, or I spooked one of the other deer in the area. Okay, chalk one up for the deer. You got me. It's going to burn and chap my ass for a long time, But it's just, that to me is where you got to take it on the chin. You learn from your mistakes, and you go, because that's this scenario. I feel
at the end of the day, animals have to win sometimes.
Unless like you have a rare scenario where you stalk up over a knob and the deer's standing there facing completely away. At that point in time, why take that shot? You've got the drop.
Yeah. They have no idea.
To me, that straightaway shot is going to be almost always on a running away animal.
Yes.
Because if you do come up on any animal, a deer specifically, that's just standing facing away from you but doesn't know you're there, I just give it 30 seconds, man. The deer are always moving and fidgeting. He's going to open up. They're going to open up to you and give you one of the best shots you can take. So, I don't know. Moving on to number 9. So this one is interesting. Straight down shots.
Oh, yeah.
So we're talking 5 yards and closer out of a deer stand. For me, I had to think about this very, very, very hardly. And I think for a gun, it's a no. And for a bow, it is I have on here, mostly no, very hard maybe. and the reason being is all about the angles. I remember when I was taught how to kill something, it's always aiming for the offside shoulder. And that's what we always typically practice, because if you draw that line through the animal and into that backside shoulder, that's where you want your projectile to go through. So with something that steep, boy, you just, you take that kill zone and you stand it up on edge. A kill zone is much, bigger side to side than it is up and down when you look at it. If you think about a two-dimensional structure here. And so I don't know. It's a very, very tough shot, and I'm lucky I haven't ever been in a situation where I've had to take it, I guess.
I think the nice thing about the situation that we're talking about is more likely than not, you and I don't gun hunt out of stands anymore. We typically do it out of blinds over a food source, and it's, later in the season. So we don't really find ourselves in that scenario oftentimes. But with a bow, the nice silver lining to what we're talking about here is if the deer is coming in and gets to your tree, more than likely on his way to or from that position, if you've done your due diligence about actually thinking about where your shooting lanes are going to be and trimming them out properly, you should have an opportunity as they're coming to or from that position. But if you don't, it's a much more difficult question, and I would probably say no as well, just because there's a lot of bad things that could happen when you're trying to ram a broadhead down through a backstrap and then into the body cavity. Because my biggest hang up with this one is, I think we all agree as archers, there's nothing more devastating than having a pass through, with 2 holes. But if you shoot a deer and you are lucky enough to get through a backstrap or through one of those upper rib areas, and you don't spine it and drop it, it's going to potentially be hung up in a place like the lungs or, near an artery of the heart where it is a fatal shot. But all I have to say is good luck tracking that deer, because there's not going to be a low blood exit that's going to create anything. You are going to be virtually looking for no blood. You're going to have to grid search probably to find that animal.
Yeah, you're old-fashioned tracking at that point, looking for disturbed grass and vegetation. You shot a doe. This is a long time ago.
Oh, this is 14 years ago.
And the deer wasn't even straight under us, but she was close. The doe was probably 10 yards, 8 yards. Mm-hmm. So you had a good angle on her.
Yep.
Arrow went in high onside lug and never exited.
Yep.
And I mean, it was a hard angle. Not straight down, because to me, again, like straight down is 15 feet or less from the base of your tree.
Right.
That is almost straight down. I mean, about as much as you can be without shooting through your platform. And so that doe went about 70 yards and died, and we didn't find not a single drop of blood. And it was very frustrating for us. We didn't give up, thank goodness, because we're like, we had the footage. We're like, dude, this deer should be dead. Like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
And as you said, she just filled completely up with blood from the bottom up. There wasn't an exit, and we ended up just grid searching that knob to find her, and she was there. And like I said, she was 70 yards, 80 yards from point of impact.
And not to bend the scenario further or anything like that into a different one, but thinking back to another buck that we've killed very close, I think the closest buck that all of us have killed from distance of tree to distance of buck was Jesse's booner that he killed about 6 years ago. You know, he shot him at 5 yards.
Right.
8 yards, something like that, like really, really tight to the tree.
And he made a perfect shot on that deer.
Yeah, perfect. And, you know, the deer went down. It's different than a straight down shot. You know, that's not what we're talking about here. But he was able at that distance that he was in the tree, you know, height-wise, to thread the needle and put it where it's supposed to be. But that's more of a real close shot than a straight down shot. Two things are not the same. So
number 10, bedded shots.
Ooh.
So this is one. This is I was thinking about like some Western scenarios that we've been on, right? Especially with your mule deer hunting. And I'm like, so for me, and I hope these, when I answer like this, it's not necessarily copping out, but I've got varies and varies again. So my answer specifically with a firearm for this, I was very close to saying no, simply because like in the scenario in my mind, you've got a deer, an elk, animal X bedded down. It doesn't know you're there because it's bedded down. Mm-hmm. You are in a good shooting position and watching it. I guess at my point is, just wait for it to stand up. You know, it could take 10 minutes. It could take 2 hours. But, you know, I guess, you know, who knows? Maybe you're running out of light. Maybe the deer or that animal didn't get up, which is a very rare scenario if a deer doesn't get up at night. But that you would have to force that bedded shot. But to me, you know, for the gun, I put varies here still, but I almost was leaning towards no because it will stand up and you got every drop on it you could ever want. With bow, I put varies as well because unfortunately sometimes you just don't have that luxury. When you get within bow range, the swirl of the wind could make a great stock crumble pretty quick. And you would sure as hell kick yourself for not taking that 36-yard bedded shot at the muley, and then the wind swirls and he jumps out of his bed like a rocket strapped to his ass, and there goes that, you know? So I think it varies situationally and even more so heavily on the situation of which the deer is sitting and laying. Because oftentimes when you're stalking, you have only one point of access to get there without being seen or smelled. And when you get there, you know, the deer's sedentary. He's laying down. So what you got is what you got. You know, if you come up and that deer is laying down broadside facing away from you and you can see, you know, the ground that he's sitting on, but laying on like it's shallow grass or sand hills or something, hey, green light, man. But if you come up and that deer's bedded in a weird angle or he's bedded in taller grass where you can only see the tops of his antlers or maybe just his neck, don't know if that's a good move, you know?
Yeah, I think I'm torn on this one, and I think that with a gun, it kind of, like you said, it depends. I think, and not that deer and other animals that we're hunting are practice dummies for us to learn things. Not at all. That's not what I'm saying. But I will say that if you have practiced a bedded shot, I think that I would trust a rifle. You know, if there was a mule deer that was, you know, able to be killed and he was bedded somewhere in between 2 and like 600 yards, I think I trust a rifle in Shane Jones's hand. I would say, hey, Shane, I know you can make this shot. Go ahead and make it happen. We'll get to a point at which you feel comfortable doing this. Because when a deer is on its side, we're just talking about deer, for example, you know, the vitals are changed. You know that they're compressed. The backside lung is kind of rolled, and it's almost like touching the ground.
Low,
it's really, really low. So the kill zone has shrunk, certainly. And there's not a big margin of error. But when I was thinking about this, I was kind of thinking about the debates you and I have about, you know, destination hunting. And the reason why I say, and I don't know if it's ethical necessarily or not, but the reason I would say go ahead and take the shot is because I'm thinking in my mind, all right, so you're on, you know, day 6 of your 7-day mule deer hunt, and you haven't had an opportunity yet or anything like that, and there's this bedded buck, and you're like, man, he's a shooter, that's an awesome deer, I'd be proud to tag him. If that's the best opportunity you have and you let it walk by, I feel like I feel like you might be shooting yourself in the foot because a bedded animal, I mean, like you said, I mean, it's all the time in the world that you have. And I agree with you about waiting on it because that's how we killed Jake's buck this year in Nebraska. They were all bedded in this draw. We had all the time in the world. We waited for him to stand up, and then Jake dropped the hammer, smoked him.
With a gun, correct.
With the gun. And so we were patient, and that worked out. But I was thinking about the scenario in which there's a deer that's bedded, and you're waiting for him to get up, and his first 2 steps, he takes, point himself straight away from you. And then your opportunity is blown. So you waited for him to stand up, but he did not do so favorably. You did not get the shot that you were waiting for, and then you just blew, an hour or 2 or 3 that you were scoped up on him, ready to roll.
Oh, with a gun, you're saying?
With a gun.
Oh, let's shoot, man.
Yeah.
It's not like he's bedded on the edge of a cliff and going to take a jump.
No. I'm not talking about that. I'm more so saying he's bedded down with a gun. You're being more so tentative. And then the first couple steps he takes as he's getting out of bed, he kind of stretches out and turns to go away.
Sure. So what?
And I guess
2 yards isn't going to make a difference.
I know, but what if he then continues away from you? And that's not necessarily the question. What I'm talking about is more so being opportunistic at the shot given. But in terms of ethics of a bedded shot, I think if it's a broadside bedded shot, I think that's totally possible with the gun. A bow, just because I'm foreign to it, I would probably say I'm torn on that one just because I've seen people do it.
Right.
I've seen it be very effective. I just haven't personally done it.
And that's why I said it varies. So, I think with archery equipment, it varies into a lot of different contexts.
Yep.
How close are you? How proficient are you with it? Your bow? How is he laying?
What's the elevation change? Are you on level ground? Or are you above? Or is he above? Or are you below?
So that's why I put it varies.
Yeah, that's a good one.
The next one, number 11, second to last here, is silhouetted shots. So like twilight or skyline shots.
Oh, boy.
For this one, I put no on both. It's like hunter education 101. Don't shoot what you don't know is behind it. So to me, a silhouetted shot is one of 2 scenarios. Either it's on a knob or on a roll or up higher on a hillside and all you can see is a silhouette, or it's like very, very early twilight and all you can make out is that silhouette, in your deer stand.
So you're talking about the time it's legal time, by the definition of the clock, but it's you can't see pins, you can't see crosshairs. Shit like that.
Right, but you can make out that it's a deer or a big deer or whatever
that you want to kill, etc.
So for me, I don't know. I'm saying no. It's again, it's a scenario I don't want to be in, where I have a deer in one of these situations, or an animal that I want to kill, I should say, in one of these situations. But I just think for safety and again for ethics, it's better to warrant waiting than to pull the trigger.
I think this is a hard one for me. I think with a bow in which I cannot see my pin, I'm definitely saying no. And if I can't see my, crosshairs, also saying no. But if, like, let's say it's 10 a.m. on opener of first gun season, and there's a buck that you and I want to kill, I think people are probably going to hate that I'm about to say this, because I do agree with you. Don't shoot at what you don't know is behind you. But most people, I would argue, most hunters that are out for gun season, bow season, whatever, most hunters should know what is behind them, what is over that cliff. And if you have, like us, we're not hunting on public land where there could be a person down there. We're not hunting in a place where we don't know what's behind there. Like, for instance, if you and me are sitting on the corner where we killed K2, and there is a deer, that comes up over the hill. I know that if on a couple different hills, if they top those hills, I know what's behind those hills. And I wouldn't want us to throw away an opportunity because we don't know what's behind a hill. Because number one, there shouldn't be anybody out there other than you and I. And I know where all the houses are. I know where all of the nearby roads are, and we're not near any of them. And so with a shotgun, for me, I know how fast the bullet drops, how fast it gets into the dirt. It's not like I can take a shotgun right now and point it up in a 45-degree angle and kill somebody 3 miles away like with a rifle. It's going to be, it's not going to travel.
You're just going to kill them a lot closer.
Yeah. So for me, I don't think a silhouetted shot when it's during the daylight, like when I can see my optic, I don't have as big of a problem with a silhouetted shot with a shotgun.
Yeah. I just feel like, man, you're even on the properties that we lease and have exclusive permission on, right? I mean, what if the farmer parked his equipment out there the night before? You know, the combine's sitting just over the knob, and you just
I'm thinking about like
285 grain slug through the engine block.
So I'm thinking about Tonto, right? A deer in which, and I'll manipulate the situation around a little bit to make you kind of see where I'm coming from. Most of you guys have watched the Tonto episode. It's actually, we were talking about it the other day, is the last deer Garrett and I have killed on our best farm in 3 years. We're going to hunt it for the first time this year because that one got hit by EHD really bad. You guys know that. And Tonto, beautiful wide 10-pointer. That's the one where we show you the slow motion shot and the blood sprays out. So let me pitch you a hypothetical. He comes up to the top of that hill.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a silhouetted shot.
Right.
I mean, in my opinion, you are high if you don't shoot. You know, I think it completely varies because you know what's behind it. A hill, you know, it depends on if there's another hill behind it, I guess.
That's what I'm going to say, because like I can see there's a backdrop behind it.
There is a backdrop to
He's silhouetted only due to the fact that there's another hill cut in the field, a waterway. Yep. But I guess when I'm referencing this,
you're talking about a mule deer at the top of a little sand hill in Nebraska.
You're shooting up and over.
Up and over, yeah.
Right. So that's, okay. I don't know.
Depends then for me.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, I don't know. If you know your ground super well and you're really confident, I mean, yeah, I go for it. And I do think with archery equipment, the skyline shot versus a silhouette shot is a lot more plausible, right? Because a bow is only going to go a couple hundred yards. But yeah, I think for most part it's not the shot that you should take.
Sure,
and that's my opinion.
I agree with
you know.
I agree with that, but I do think in certain scenarios that it's like, man, all right. I know that the hunter safety courses are telling you to not do that, but man, I would, like I said, with opportunities, I think
I really question how many opportunities you've had where we've had
something that was truly skylined.
I don't think of one that we have, and it's for the most reasons because our blinds are elevated and we hunt out of a deer stand almost exclusively.
That's probably wise because every position we're in is a position where we're elevated, we're shooting downward.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, yeah, but there are potential spots where we could shoot a skyline deer, I suppose, here, especially if we're hunting on the ground. Yeah. Moving on. That was kind of a wishy-washy one, and so is this one. It's kind of a, these last two are kind of ones that are like, well, duh. But sometimes the opportunity presents itself. Mm-hmm. And this one is called stacked shots. So,
I know what you mean by that.
So yeah, you've got, especially this happens quite often in late season or quite often in turkey season. Plains animals, it happens, right? Where you've got your target animal, but unfortunately you've got
a group of something.
Right. You've got another one or several ones behind it. And so for this one, with a bow, I said yes. And with a gun, I said it varies. And I think that a lot of people would, if they were going to draw the hard hunter safety line, they'd say no and no. But for me, with a bow, I guess they're, especially out of any type of elevated platform, it's going right in the dirt. Mm-hmm. And even on flat ground, the arrows fall so fast that, even if there was a deer, let's say 15 yards behind your target deer, I guess it could maybe hit it, but it probably would be way off course by then. Well, gun is a lot different for a couple reasons, and one of the things that I want to highlight is ricochets with frozen ground.
Yeah, that's a good point.
A skipping shot, if you will. But also more importantly, the fact that guns are way more powerful than bows, and you can blow through one deer and still have enough energy with that projectile if it holds together to be lethal to kill the next one, right?
Yeah. Ethically, I think. I mean, we've had a scenario before where each of us have had a scenario before in which we have done this, but in the case of Big Daddy No Brows here behind us, that night that I killed him, the field was absolutely littered with deer. So, 30, 40 deer that night. There was a lot of deer that were milling around behind this deer that I shot, but we waited for the other deer to clear before we did so, just because we had all the time in the world. Deer wasn't going anywhere, and so we waited for the does and bucks that were behind him to kind of mingle their way through, and as soon as they cleared, we shot him. He died. Great hunt, great memory. And I feel like if you have the time on your side, you can definitely do that, and I think, like you said, when you're talking with a gun, there's definitely an opportunity for a more flat projectile shot to occur, especially if you were on a ground blind, truly on the ground.
Oh, yeah.
Meaning that you were shooting a more or less a level shot, a shot that is going parallel with the surface of the earth. There's an opportunity to kill more than one animal or to wound an animal behind with a gun. And I guess with a bow too, it could be pulled off. It's not as likely, but you have had that happen to you.
Get a load of this, listeners.
I don't think these guys know this.
One of the first. It wasn't the first deer I killed with my bow, but one of the first ones. I was hunting by myself, and this is before I could drive. My dad was waiting for me at the farm entrance, and so I'm up in the tree, and here's Green.
I think is when you're 17.
Yep, Green, Garrett, and these group of 4 does come in. It's early season. Draw back, and all I was worried about was the doe that was closest to me. Shot, smoked her, and watched her run off and die. And I was pumped, like super pumped. Like, mind you, these might have been number 2 and 3 deer I've killed with my bow. I think they were almost.
Yeah.
And so I jumped down and raced to the truck and tell my dad, and he's like, cool, let's go find it. So we go track it, and he's like, well, we go back and we find the arrow, and the blood's everywhere. I mean, just freaking everywhere. And he's like, well, what's this blood over here? Because we found my doe, the doe, and he's like, what's this blood? And I'm like, I don't know. He's like, well, there's a lot more blood over here too. And I mean, it was like big gushes of blood. And about another 30 yards further was a second doe that I had shot. I went through like the center lungs of the first doe, and I guess the doe behind it was eating some of the foliage, had her head down, and I shot her right through the neck. One of the shots we talked about. It wasn't planned, not at all,
right?
But it went right through her neck, and she had bled out through hemorrhaging. Like I must have hit her jugular.
Yeah.
And so the doe I shot was trying to kill, died within like 40, 50 yards. And then this one was like about 80 yards away. And my dad's like, did you shoot? I was like, no, I didn't. I was like,
yeah.
It was the most crazy thing that had happened. Totally unplanned. A stacked shot. Yeah. And like I said, young Green Garrett totally threw that shit out of my mind. You get like locked on and in the trance. And here I am, up there and just locked onto her. Drew back. I didn't even stop her. I know I didn't. I just waited for her to stop on her own and sent it, and then that was it. But it's crazy, not planned. Definitely probably not the thing to do, but young, dumb Garrett that if it was brown, it was down and was earning my bars. I sent it. So, anywho, stack shots, I think, for the most part, it's no and no. Bow varies. The one question that I wanted to ask you is how far behind do you think it's safe? Like you're in the scenario where you're talking about, and you got a ground blind, and you're in there with a firearm. If there's another animal 100 yards past it, is it fine? 50 yards past it? What point in time is it?
I think it's a total crapshoot is what we're talking about, because I think if there is so our Remington, our AccuTip that we shoot, more times than not, especially on a big buck, we will find the slug. We will not get a pass through. It'll be caught in the offside skin because it is more of a coring hole, and when that AccuTip expands, rolls back, the copper rolls, it's smooth, and we will not get a pass through with that bullet. We'll find our deer almost immediately. They'll either drop right in front of us, or we'll follow a really short blood trail to the deer. So I wanted to bring that up real quick because it kind of depends on the projectile you're shooting. But I am under the belief that when things go into deer's body cavities, weird shit tends to happen. I'll bring up an example that happened to you and I 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, we were hunting in a stand we called the Trench. The EK10 came by. You made an absolutely, if you drew it up on a whitetail diagram, I couldn't put it in a more perfect spot. It was that upper heart, low lungs area right behind the shoulder. Lots of you guys have seen the video that we're talking about. Beautiful deer. And as soon as you shot that deer, it skipped and it exited out like back, like in front of the ham back. And I was like, what the hell?
Right.
What the absolute hell? Because when we shot that deer, he was broadside. I mean, legitimately broadside. And as soon as you shot, it was literally a perfect shot. For whatever reason, that arrow took the path of least resistance, hit a rib, split a rib, cracked a rib, pivoted on something to the point where it exited back. It did not follow a straight line. And I think the same can be said about, projectiles in the air. So I think what we're talking about right now is if there's something behind what you're shooting at, I think it's a total fucking crapshoot, because if the bullet goes straight and there's something perfectly straight behind it, it could kill it. But if the bullet deflects or ricochets or whatever, I think it could end up killing it as well. It's just it's a very small amount of percentage. It's extreme luck.
So
if it does,
I totally get what you're saying.
I'm just saying, like, now are we deducing this to the point where we're only killing single deer in a field? Because
right.
that would suck.
So to your point, Pat shoots muzzleloader, our father-in-law, and he shoots Thompson Center Shockwave. The bullet shoots light out, but we have seen this firsthand. He'll hit a deer very well, and then the exit will be, out the bottom of the body cavity.
Yeah,
weird. And so I get what you're saying. Wait for the animal to clear behind it, sure, but what if it skips off a rib
and it goes left or it goes right or it goes up or down?
Right.
Who knows?
Right. I think so. Anyway, to end this, and thank you all for listening. This was, a decent one. I think for stacked shots, it's, yes, wait for you to have a clear shot. Wait for you to have an open shot. But
assume the projectile you're shooting is going to travel in a straight line, and wait till that straight line is vacated out the back of what you're shooting. Yeah. But don't be surprised if projectiles do crazy weird shit when they hit the skeletal system of a deer.
Right.
Because like when these bullets are tested, they're tested into memory foam and gelatin and ballistic gel and stuff like that. And when arrows are tested, they're shot into foam. When arrows are tested, they're rarely shot at anything hard, especially not something with the exact density and structure that a deer's bone has. So I just think don't wait for the ethical opportunity, but don't be surprised if like a 1 in a million kind of shot happens, because I'm sure there are all over the country scenarios where people are shooting antelope, mule deer, whitetail, elk, something like that in a group, and they're waiting for that animal to clear, and then boom, they pull the trigger, and they're surprised to find that when the smoke settles, that there are two things laying dead right there. I'm sure that's happened a time or two.
Oh yeah.
So